clock at the bottom of the screen.
I have 6:58.
Yeah, I've got 6:58 as well. Welcome, everybody. We're all here tonight, isn't that? That's great. That's good. Yeah. Does everybody have the updated agenda?
Yeah.
I think it's version 5. We should be putting this up at the top of them, 5.1 or 5.0 or something.
How do you get your paper agendas?
Rent them.
I always go for paper agendas. Yeah.
Do you print them at home?
I printed this at home, the agenda copy. Yeah.
Careful with your receipts, your expense receipts.
Ooh,
Yeah, I don't submit. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Lindsay, for resending me the Zoom meeting invite. You know me well.
It was automatic. It gets sent to everyone an hour before.
Yes, we all get it. Yeah.
I thought maybe she sent it specifically just for me, like right at the last minute.
You think you're special. That's why.
Just need special help, maybe. So I'm assuming that the updated council agenda is on the website or not?
yeah, it's on the website.
Okay. I'm working off of 2 different computers, so.
Okay, good evening, and to the corporate officer, are we ready to proceed?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we're both live on Zoom and it's live streaming on YouTube.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's meeting. This is the regular meeting of council for July 7, 2020, and call the meeting to order at 7 p.m., acknowledging that we are meeting tonight in the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. We have an agenda. This is an updated agenda from the one that went out earlier. I'm also going to amend this agenda. And what I want to do is a simple numbering thing. We're going to make number 4 on the agenda will become 5, and number 5 will become 4. Okay. It's just to get things in the right order of proceeding tonight. So with that change and that amendment, somebody move the agenda, please. Councillor Kroll, Councillor Lumley, thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much, Council. We'll go firstly then to adoption of the minutes, and we have minutes of June 16, June 24, and June 26. I take one resolution to adopt them all. Councillor Lumley, Councillor Jendrad, thank you. All in favor of adopting those minutes? Okay, thank you. Adopted. Any business arising from those minutes, from either sets of those minutes? Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to item number 5, which is the delegation, and welcome Sandy Buck for Deer Crossing the Art Farm to talk about the walk-on water tour. Sandy.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm not seeing Sandy in the meeting yet. So if you just give me one moment.
Yeah, town hall.
That's where Lindsay is at town hall. So Lindsay does take the meetings at town hall, and we can accommodate up to 5 members of the public there, so that she's there just in case anybody comes to the door wanting to come and sit in council chambers and participate in the meeting. So.
So there's five members of the public can be in the room at one time?
That's correct. Yeah, there's the seating's been kind of squared away inside the council chambers for that purpose.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I have Chad as an attendee at the meeting, and he's just raised his hand, so I'm going to turn on his mic. He might know.
Good, thank you.
Hi, Chad, your mic is on if you would like to speak.
Chad and Sandy from Deer Crossing the Art Farm.
Oh, you're Sandy. Hi, Sandy. Yeah. Welcome.
Promoted.
Hey.
Exciting.
I don't know if you can see us.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are now, wait, no, our video's off. Okay.
There
There
we
you
go.
are. Good to see you now. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
I I don't know, I just saw the agenda.
Yeah.
Was there in the agenda package, was the kind of PDF attached of the presentation we put together?
It was sent to the council.
It's okay if it's not, because we can share our screen with you.
Please do that. Thank
All
you.
right, we will do that. So long as I can find it. There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So what we're gonna do is walk you through the walk on water, which was back, gosh, it was back in probably, well, before last year.
COVID.
Right, well, long
was-
before
It
COVID.
was, yeah, November, December that we
November,
met. I
December,
think with
yeah.
Manny. Yeah.
With Manny, who had this project, Walk on Water, that was on the shelf for quite a while and presented to the art farm because of asking us, and is this something that the art farm could help with in the sense of presenting signage? But the scope of the project is so awesome. And we also did a project, of course, with the Nature's Assets in previous years. We really wanted to go deeper, lack the pun. So this is what we're going to present to you, how we got to where the signs are. And my question to council, have you seen them?
Yes, we have. My wife and I were walking on the weekend and she came across them and was quite interested in the whole program. So I had a chance to talk to her about it.
Oh, great.
Right, well, we'll
Yeah,
start at the beginning.
and just to clarify, so this project, it was something that I think has been on, something that the town has been wanting to do for a number of years now. Some money had been put aside for this signage, and because of the success of the Walk on Water project, I think it was about 4 years ago.
Oh, for 2014 was a while ago.
Okay, around 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So the idea was to take what was successful about that and sort of adapt it, interpret it, and make it a slightly more engaging, permanent, or at least semi-permanent exploration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have to say that, well, I'm really glad that I'm glad that it happened, that we were able to continue with this project, because so many other projects have been literally stopped in their path with everything going on in the world. So here we are.
All right. So
Can you see the screen?
Yes, it's on the screen, and that's good because there are other people watching as well. So
Oh, great. So yeah, these were the goals of the project that we worked out with Manny. We wanted to do something that with any project that we do, we try to bring in the community in some way, to engage with them, to generate the outcomes, the creative outcomes. We find that process creates something a lot richer and has a more profound kind of impact on the community. So I won't read through all of those, but you can kind of see them there.
Yep.
All right. This is
The map. So the project as it was all these different, there was 8 locations originally, and these are the different locations where they are currently now. And I think I'm just going to go ahead. And community collaboration, again, as Chad was saying, is very important to us. It's really deep rooted in our projects, because without the community, without the public, that we couldn't go forward on the type of projects that we do. So I'm just going to move it ahead. So what we did back in January is we gathered, what we wanted to do was actually walk the walk, because I hadn't done it before and people on our team hadn't, but I also wanted to incorporate the community. So we invited there was about 20 people back in January, families, young children, and to this walk. And we started at the Gibsons Museum. And I was very lucky to, at the last minute, I did invite a Squamish elder, or wasn't actually an elder, Squamish Nations, to Deborah Baker, to see if she could be a part of it and open just to talk about the land. Now, she couldn't come, but her brother, Richard Baker was able to attend, and he did not want to have any photos done at that time, but the stories that he shared with us, as well as the gifts that he gave the children during that talk that we did at the museum, was really the essence of the entire artwork that came from the project. And his lasting words that with the group was that this is, you are the, to the young children, which he gifted everybody carvings, you are the young generation that is going to move forward, and you are the caretakers of the land. So that really stuck with us. And this was the group here. We're all, and it was pouring rain that day. Like, it was sopping wet. And I have to really put it out to this group. They're actually, most of them, they're part of the Spider program, which is home learners on the Sunshine Coast. And this is just a group of them there. So we took the papers, like the walk, and we did the walk and continued down. And this is us going along the way. The person on the right-hand side, Hazel, she is the artist that did the renderings, and she's a local artist. Her family has had land on the Sunshine Coast for, gosh, many generations. So she was very honored to be a part of it as well. And we're continuing on. And at every point where there would have been a guide, we stopped and we read the interpretation of the information that was given to us. And then if anybody had questions, we would write them down because we didn't necessarily have any answers. And then again, that was put into the process of the interpretation of the signage. And so there we are reading all the information that was given by the town of Gibsons. And they enjoyed it. And then we took that information and we went back to the art farm and we sat as a group. What can we do that would be engaging as a sign? And we did a lot of brainstorming. And we also so where we're located, Deer Crossing the Art Farm, is just at the base of Mount Elphinstone. So there's a creek at the top of our property. So we incorporated the land into our process of the signage, like what takes one person from one step. So it was very involved in depth. And then we also built our own aquifer. So this is actually a project that we did back quite a few years ago for the beginning of the Nature's Assets. And I'm nowhere near a scientist, but I really enjoyed the information that was given. And with the aquifer, the layering process, and it's fascinating. So how do we engage the children with all this information? Well, we build it. So that's what we did. So we took the different forms of clay and rock and tables and all that, and then we built an aquifer. And it was fun and engaging. I recommend everybody do this. And there we are. Just to see the filtration system. Now, of course, 1 drop of water takes 9 years to get down into the aquifer, which is, again, fascinating. So the design concept. It was really important, again, to go back to recognizing the land and the history and the people that were here long before George Gibson arrived, because and the formation of the glaciers that came together. It's really fascinating. I'll have to do maybe we'll make a show about it one day. So this is just information we brought into it, and developed 7 strategies with the science. And so how do we engage? So on our team, we have this incredible person, Chloe Langmaid, who is the equivalent to anybody who's under my age knows how to work the computers. So they came with a QR code. And so if you hold your smartphone up to the QR code on the sign, then that will take you to the history, which I think Elizabeth was working directly with Kelly Foley on our end, and creating this engaging website through the town. Please stop me if you have any questions, and I'll try to answer. So the process lasted from January of this year up until the signs were made, and there's still hopefully more to come.
I should add that so there's sort of we because the science behind this, which is, as Sandy said, really interesting and rich, but it's also for children, or even for me at times, it's like a lot of information. So we we wanted to try to get that down to the bare essence. So it was sort of as clear a narrative as possible to bring out the kind of the uniqueness of what this asset is for the town. And also we created a game that was focused on animals and how they engage with the aquifer, just again to try to, and that was in large part for children. So if families are walking the tour, they have sort of a game to play, but it also helps to kind of shift your thinking. That was sort of our idea behind it.
And that came from Richard Baker as well. Like he was the Indigenous knowledge carrier of Squamish Nations who came over again at the last minute. He decided the night before, he heard about it and wanted to come over. And he told us a story, which we didn't bring it into, there's so much cultural back and what is the word I'm looking for? When we shared a story, you can't necessarily share that story without going through protocol. But we were so enamored with this story sharing that we wanted to incorporate that into the sign as well. That's where the animals came from. And it was a story of how eagle got its eyes. And I'll save it to the end if we have any more information or more time. So Hazel went and took all this information, and each sign has an animal that you can find out again with your QR code. And so on the sign, so it'll entice you to say which animal is sitting here that relies on the aquifer. And here we are, design specs. We went around the town working with the town and at the different spots and deciding on what the sign should look like. And we were guided that the size that it is approximately now. And honestly, I feel like they're still too small. I thought they'd be too big, but I feel like they could be bigger. But there you go. And here we are. Here is the signage. And they are in place. Each one they're all the same look, but there's a little different in each one. And it talks about the different locations, like their relation to the aquifer in all those locations. And it starts at the main aquifer site where all the water comes out. At the fountain.
Mhm.
And so if people come across it, but we also didn't want people to, they might come across it while they're down walking on the pier. So we wanted to let them know that there was 7 signs. And
I'm going to stop the share and see if there's any questions.
Questions, Council? Councillor Lumley.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank you. And Sandy, maybe you shouldn't be so humble. You could just say, I'm glad the outcome was awesome.
thank you.
I still walk over your fish on the boardwalk when I go to work every day.
Cool.
So there's a few survived. So your impact is lasting. So I thought it turned out great. And that kid in the red shirt that's amazed at the aquifer, that's probably Manny's replacement in the future, I would imagine.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. He's an engineer.
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. No, I think it's a great project, and I like the fact you use the QR reader. I think about the only thing that I would recommend is, because it's something that, the tourists are going to see and they're not familiar with the area, that perhaps on the link that you go to, if you click on the QR reader with the map, that there were actual street names.
Yes.
Because people,
I have no idea.
they don't know where they are. They don't know whether they're on the Seawalk or on Marine Drive or on Gower Point. And at least it would give them some direction and a compass bearing. But I think the project is great. I know when I first got elected, we were talking about, they have the Gibsons water bottles. And I thought, anything that makes people aware of this amazing asset we have. And even, I don't know if you've seen in the city of Vancouver, they have these water patterns on the sidewalk in various places.
Yeah.
And it tells you you're walking on this underground stream or what was an underground river. So it's I think it's an amazing education project, and kudos to you for making it
Thank
happen.
you. Thank you for stating that, because after going back and seeing the signs, I definitely recommend that there's a few things I wish I could tweak, but the signs are up, and
We can tweak the website.
we can
though.
tweak the website.
The
Yeah.
website's probably easier to tweak, but I love the way you have the animals featured, and the animal on the sign that's a feature animal for that area is it pops out in the
Right.
in the solid color. So it's it's a great fun project, and it's a very walkable walk
Yeah.
for people to do. So,
I'm quite an opportunist as well as I always look for the positive. And so I feel like our future, the schools, I just think for the town of Gibsons, this is an incredible gift that anybody can share. And I think the schools, every single school should know about it, which is I hope to go there and let them know that this is something that your school groups can do, because it's also in this day of who knows what school is going to look like.
yeah. Well, the nice thing is the museum usually does twice a year the museum school.
Yeah.
Where they get children from all the schools on the coast, and they spend a week at the museum.
Yeah.
So this is a beautiful component for them to use with the children. So way to go.
Thank you. And I really feel like, anyway, I could talk on and on, but I feel like it's an incredible asset leverage system that the town of Gibsons has, that they can present to other municipalities and say, look at this incredible the usage that we've done. So we can talk.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I do encourage you, I don't know how we're going to get it out to the schools. My wife and I were walking by, as I say, last weekend, and she's a teaching assistant at Gibson Elementary. And during this period of May, June, they did a lot of walks, but that's the first time she'd seen that sign.
Yeah,
and
it just went out.
it'd be great to have that kind of available for the students in the future as part of the that walk. And Nicholas Tontag Center and the museum, they all come together.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got so much more to say, and I know that you're under a tight schedule, so I would love to follow up, have a follow-up meeting about that. There's a yes, to have a follow-up meeting. My thought now for the tourists that are coming, because again, we didn't even know a month ago that that the doors would be so open, but even just a chalk with an arrow. I'm gonna go around and say, hey, take a look at this. So people are looking for things to do.
Yes,
so.
they are. Yeah, it's great. I appreciate that. And how's your dog? How's your new dog?
Oh my God. Sunny.
She's a really a lot of work.
She's good. She's a lot like my 11-year-old daughter. They're both wild. But she's growing and she's lovely, and we see her down. You'll see her down walking around, and she's a Roberts Creek smut special. So we love it. We love it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care of both of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting
Be in
us.
touch.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay, at this time on our agenda, it's the opportunity for inquiries, and these inquiries relate to any items that are on the agenda this evening for consideration by council. So I'll turn it over to our corporate officer to open the mics.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, I'll ask anybody who's in the meeting as an attendee. At the bottom of your screen, there's a raise hand button. If you press that, I can turn your mic and video on. And I'm not seeing any, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to administration reports, section 7. And first of all, I'd like a resolution from council to receive all of the reports tonight. Councillor Crowell, thank you. Councillor DeAndrade, thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. So we'll go down. First of all, we have the 7.1, and this is the development variance permit application for 308 Skyline Drive. And I'll turn to the Director of Planning.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is an application for 2 variances. Right now, there's an active subdivision application at 308 Skyline Drive. They want to subdivide the property into 2 lots. There's 2 variance requests. One is a variance to the zoning bylaw and one is to the subdivision standard. So the variance for the zoning bylaw is to reduce the,
I'm just going to recuse myself because I live at 308 Skyline. So
Oh, do you? Okay.
so
Didn't realize that's why I thought you were asking a question. You can ask a
I'm
question.
going to turn everything off, and
All right.
somebody can text me when everything's good.
Thank you. Yeah.
okay.
I should clarify, this is not Councillor Lumley's property, though. Okay.
All right. So the variance request is to relax the front setback from 7.5 meters to 2 meters. And that's a zoning variance. And then the subdivision variance is to allow for an overhead conduit and wiring for the supply and distribution of electrical power, telephone, and cable vision. So the reason they're asking for the variance is because it's on a big rock bluff and there's a steep slope drop off at the back of the property. So this would allow a buildable area on the front of the property, and it would allow the supply of the wires to access the property without blasting it. So notifications were sent out on June 18th to notify property owners. Since the notices went out, we received one comment in opposition. The comment was specific to an increase in density. So they opposed the increase in density. So basically the new lot. So staff note that it didn't speak specifically to the variance request, and the subdivision meets the zoning bylaw requirements. So the applicant is in the audience if council has any questions. Staff are recommending that the mayor provides an opportunity for the public to speak, and staff are recommending the issuance of the variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And before I offer the public a chance to speak, does council have any questions? Councillor Kroll.
Not so much a question, but an observation with respect to the one letter of opposition. When you look at the lot sizes and the density per the lot sizes in the material that's been provided to us, so it's an aerial photograph with the lot lines laid in, and it becomes blatantly apparent that this is a huge lot with a single house. All the other properties are half the size with a single house. So subdividing the lot and adding one house, yes, it's increasing the overall density of the area by one, but it's not like they're building a sixplex on the property. So, it's, I appreciate the comment, but it's not really an accurate reference to what's actually transpiring on the property. And I just thought that should be made clear.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Kroll. Seeing no other councillors' hands up, I'll then go to the persons in the audience and provide an opportunity for anybody who is affected by the variance to be heard. I'll turn that over to our corporate officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, if any member of the public would like to speak, I ask that you use the raise the hand feature at the bottom of the screen, and I'll turn your mic and video on.
So we'll ask a second time. Does anybody wish to speak? And we'll ask a third time.
And I'm not seeing any responses.
None?
Mr.
Thank you very much. So then council, there is a recommendation. The council authorize the issuance of development variance permit 2020-03 for 308 Skyline Drive. Somebody care to move that? Councillor Ladwig, Councillor Kroll, seconded. Any further discussion by council? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. And thank you to the applicant who is in the audience. Thank you. Okay, we'll invite Councillor Lumley to return.
One moment, Mr. Mayor, I'll contact him. And the applicant has just raised his hand. Did you want to give him an opportunity to speak?
Certainly, if you'd like to take an opportunity, but yeah. You got him?
There we go.
Okay. Mr. Bellerat. Yes, how are you? That's been approved now.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, it has been approved, so you're not speaking to the issue. Yeah, other than just speaking to the issue.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, my speaker turned off, but you can hear me. And if I may take a few seconds of your time just to thank you for your consideration of this, especially the discussion around density. And I had hoped to be there in person with you for old time's sake, but sadly that's not possible. It's nice to see you all, and thanks very much and have a good night.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to committee reports, and we have the report of the Special Planning Committee meeting of June 24th and the recommendation regarding the cannabis production facility. And the recommendation, first of all, the minutes have been received, but we'll just say the minutes of the Special Planning Development Committee move receipt for the minutes. Councillor Kroll, thank you. Councillor Ladwig, thank you. All in favor of receipt of the minutes? Thank you. And the recommendation that bylaw number 12881 be forwarded to council for first and second reading, so we will see that. And this is for the cannabis, this is for the control invasion of noxious weeds. So that's been forwarded to council. We're at council. We'll see it later. So I don't know if we need to actually move or second this. This is actually just part of the minutes.
It was the recommendation that came out of the Planning and Development Committee.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll recommend so that council will receive that tonight for first, second reading. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Kroll, Councillor Diendrad, you've got your hand up. Councillor Kroll.
Councillor Dendradi had her hand up first.
Councillor Diendrad.
Thank you. I would like to speak to this bylaw, so I'm trying to understand, because it's on the minutes.
Yeah, it's on the agenda itself too.
Yeah, sorry, in the agenda, should we wait?
Yes, wait.
Okay.
Wait to speak to it on the agenda. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Kroll, did you have anything?
No, it's fine. I was just going to mention that
Okay.
I think we're okay.
Okay. Coming from the Plan and Development Committee meeting of July 7th, this was earlier today, and recommendation that the tree preservation bylaw discussion and motions be directed to council tonight. So this was a discussion of a tree preservation bylaw, bylaw number 1282, 2020. And it'd be forwarded to council for first and second reading. It also recommended that staff be instructed to report back to council during the last quarter of 2020 to provide feedback on the reception of the tree preservation bylaw by the public and contractors, and to recommend any amendments based upon experience of applying the bylaw, and that the staff be instructed to continue with plans for protection and preservation of our urban forest, including amending the subdivision development surfacing bylaw, examine establishing a national healing forest as part of the White Tower Pond expansion, provide a report detailing the next steps in establishing an urban forest master strategic plan, and further the council staffing public consultation plan for the bylaw review, and further the staff develop a communications plan that encourages voluntary compliance with the spirit of the bylaw in the community until the adoption of the tree preservation bylaw. What we're going to possibly look at is when we see with the public consultation, it could even include a public hearing for discussion. So we'll take a look at that as we go forward. But staff, I guess what we're doing here tonight is giving it first and second reading, and it's going to sit there until we determine what the consultation process is going to be and how we're going to deal with that. If my recollection, Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, a couple of things I'd just like to maybe make known is that during the Planning Development Committee, if somebody wasn't listening, there was discussion of a moratorium, which was softened by council for the and further that people would hopefully comply with the spirit of the bylaw. So I just wanted to make sure that that was brought to light, that if you weren't at the Planning Development Committee, there was going to be a moratorium, but this was a little softer. And I'm just not sure in this state of where we are right now, I'm not sure what a public hearing would look like with respect to our current, I wouldn't want to slow the bylaw down by any means until we could have a public hearing, but I'm just not sure how that would play out.
They can be held electronically. I'll go to corporate officer. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have 3 public hearings scheduled on the 14th, so we can give it a good run then for the electronic public hearing, but they'll run much like these meetings run.
Yeah. And you can get more people involved in them, things. Councillor Kroll?
We just had a Zoom public hearing with the regional district, and it went surprisingly well. They switched their format of Zoom to what we currently use. So the people who wanted to speak came up as attendees. There was within the screen, there was a speakers list. So it worked really well. I think that the important thing with this, and I don't know what the capacity of staff is, but I think it's a critical component of this, that it be communicated out, what we're trying to do, and that people do have an opportunity to sort of look at it and digest it a bit, so that when they come to a public hearing, that they've got a broader comprehension of what's happening. So I think, staff have done a really great job with this. As I mentioned this afternoon at the planning and development meeting, I found it was sort of like Christmas and getting a wonderful package put on our desk. Particularly as I'm sort of very fond of the Healing Forest project, to find that it's it's found its way to paper, which is better than where it's been up until now. And I would just raise that again, that because the pond project, and there's some exciting news around that it could be rolled into a really good sort of good news story for the community, aside from the bylaw. So I would again caution that the pond project and the bylaw and the Healing Forest don't get embedded and lost in the shuffle.
Councillor Diandrad?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just, I just want to have a better understanding of the timing, because according to the recommendation, staff will bring back a public consultation plan, right, for the bylaw. But then we're talking about the public hearing. Are we doing both, or what's the timing?
Well, I think the consultation plan will consider a public hearing in the timing. We talked about perhaps doing the public hearing in September. I think the important thing is that public has an opportunity to look at this on our website, to understand it, and then in September, when we come back from our break, have the public hearing. And at that point in time, we could be prepared to go forward with third reading and move towards final reading if there are no major amendments, or amend it and then move forward. So those are the things we can do. And rather than wait till November, I think we could actually have this in place and finalized in shorter time frame.
And Mr. Mayor, a suggestion, I know we didn't go to the details, but if we could possibly use all means that we have, right, website, newsletters, perhaps our bills, the utilities bill, newspapers, and others.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody, yeah.
I'll maybe use the column in the local that comes up again in August, and get Elizabeth to help me with some words around that. This would be a good article for the column, including the Healing Forest. So, okay. And if anybody ever wants to write that column, by the way, just feel free. Let me know. Once a month, I get to write a paragraph or two. Okay, so that's the recommendation. Somebody care to move the recommendation as it is? Councillor Kroll, thank you. Councillor Ladwig, thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much, Council. And an exciting time to see that come forward, and the opportunities that presents, as well as the almost $1 million we got from the province for the White Tower Forest Ponds. It's excellent. So, Okay, we're now on item 9 on the agenda, which is council reports, and invite councilors to step forward if they have anything they'd like to inform the public or each other about. Okay, I'm going to go Councilor Diendrad, then Councilor Lumley.
I had a meeting with the executive of the Gibson Senior Society. Was quite pleased with the numbers. They provided the numbers during the COVID. They increased the membership like 46 members. This is 16%, yeah. So, and they are extremely active. You know, we may think that they would be the group to slow down. I was really impressed. They're still going ahead with the planning committee, and they're gonna form a publicity committee to attract more members. And they're still working on improvements in the kitchen and the program as well that is done in partnership with an external person. But yeah, no, very successful. And they were also requested a meeting with you, and
Yep.
I said I would be arranging that. So that's
Good. Yeah.
that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Councilor Lumley.
Yeah, it's more of a report, like a business report than a council. I mean, I am a counselor and I do have a business. I know that there's a lot of people since I guess phase 3, and the province gave everyone permission to travel within the province. And as we would expect, people want to come to the Sunshine Coast. But I would suggest that people that live here have to have a little bit of patience, because as much as these small businesses need tourists, the small businesses aren't specifically responsible for how tourists act or don't act properly outside their business. I know most businesses have a protocol administered by the health department, but how these people act in public, we have no control over. So I just would hope that everyone has a little bit of patience. I mean, the more education is the better, but believe me, from being busy, half capacity, knowing that I have to be busy, it's just everybody's got to kind of, I know there's a lot of people coming to town and a lot of people get afraid, but we just have to continue to educate people and make sure that people do the right thing. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you. Councilor Crowell.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. Just a couple of things. And first of all, to follow on with Councillor Lumley, I commend businesses that have reopened and are very carefully following the protocols that have been set out by the Minister of Health. I also notice that businesses that have reopened and they don't seem to have a very concerned attitude towards anyone's safety. Either their customers, their staff. I find it a little disconcerting that people just sort of have been given very clear directions, and a lot of businesses have gone to a lot of expense, not only what they've put in place, but what it's costing them in reduced capacity. And for other businesses to turn around with sort of a blatant disregard for that, I find a bit unconscionable. I'm not going to mention any names, but you know, I think everyone needs to play with the same deck, and I don't think it's fair that businesses that follow procedures carefully and are compromising their revenue potential by following this, and they're being penalized financially for being the good guys, and other people just don't care. So I just wanted that to sort of be brought to the surface. On a couple of other notes, I think people are becoming more and more aware, and it's partially because of the COVID thing that people have been isolated. We've had 3 drug-related deaths on the Sunshine Coast in the recent past. To this end, there's been measures to investigate setting up some safe injection sites. Both Mayor Beamish and I have attended a couple of special CAT meetings with respect to it. I think it's you know, it's something we don't like to have to say we have a problem in our communities, but we do have a problem in our communities. And the sooner we recognize it um, and I'll quote one of our students on council who said, the sooner it's realized that drug addiction is a medical condition and not a criminal situation, the sooner we'll be able to deal with it in a humane manner. People are being treated, well, they're being treated very disrespectfully in social media because they have a physical problem. And I think as a community, we need to sort of look out for our most vulnerable, whether we like the situation or not. And there's a session coming up to sort of do a survey in the community up for people who need help and what can be offered to them. So I think it's something that needs to be supported. Both the mayor and I have been working with the CAT team and the group that are proposing the safe injection sites. So, you know, it's something that we need to realize that is a problem in the community and that it needs to be addressed. On another note, the local marine search and rescue station is up and running. That took some doing, getting personal protective equipment for crew and coming up with protocols. And to that end, the station has been stood up and we've already had a unique call. We were tasked by Emergency Measures BC, and it's the first time we've ever been tasked by them. So it was opening new doors. It also increases our opportunities for tasking. So it was a happy ending story. It was someone who'd gone missing on Gambier Island, and we were tasked to transport Landsar search people and do a shoreline search. But before we actually got over to Gambier, we were stood down. The lady had been found. So it was a happy ending story. And I just wanted to advise the Marine community that we're back up and running. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crowell. And thank you for bringing up the safe injection site. I had that as a note to bring up as well. And how this came about in terms of this survey in Gibsons is that a survey was conducted on the coast, and the intention was to bring forward a safe injection sites. As you recall from our last meeting, Councillor Crowell and I, talking to the CAT, questioned actually the number of the need for a safe injection site in Gibsons. Because the numbers were not significant. In fact, they were negligible in their survey. So that's why they are conducting another survey instead of simply arriving here with a pop-up site and getting people excited about it. So they have agreed to come down here and do a survey like they did in Seashelt, just to see what that population of people who would rely on a safe injection site would be if one were here, so that we know what that extent of that problem is. During this past period, I was also part of the leadership forum, and I appreciate most of you spent 3.5 hours on Zoom one night talking to not-for-profits in the community and learning about their challenges at this point in time, and that was very interesting. 2 days later, Charlene Sanjenko had, working with the community, had organized a business forum, and I participated in that as well. And that was held in the morning of the Thursday after our meeting. Subsequently, you had a meeting online call with Minister Robinson, and CIO and myself took that call. Our group was made up of small communities throughout the province, and it was interesting to hear the various challenges that they were all having. One of the biggest one was the consistent one was the loss of events. Talking about just the major events in the community that organizations relied upon for fundraising, and we heard that on our own call. We heard that with the Rotary Club and with the public market having to do their fundraising in different ways and looking for ideas, and that was very interesting. That was a common theme. The minister was looking for ideas as to where some of the provincial funding could be placed and how it could be used in communities, and that was primarily purpose of the call, they were actually going to be talking to every community in the province. So one of the things that I mentioned would be that, a lot of our businesses, because they have been suffering, because they haven't been generating the revenues, that to provide some funding for them for a downtown revitalization project that would enable them to employ local people to do some revitalization on the exteriors of their buildings, whether it's painting or improvements or repairs. And there are communities, there are programs that do that. And that in this time of lack of funds, it might be a good opportunity to also employ some local people in working with the businesses to do those improvements. So that was one of the things that we brought forward for discussion on that. But the other thing that Nicholas Simons informed me today, that he is going to be talking again to BC Ferries, to the minister, about adjusting the schedule once again. We do have the extra Friday and Sunday sailings, but if anybody's taken the ferry lately, they all know that the schedule is to be a half an hour late. It seems to be no matter what sort of thing. So that he also said that the resident priority boarding is not working, and they're going to look for some options and look to see that they want to ensure that the medical cases are given priority, but that the resident priority has not been successful. So that's one of the areas that he's looking at. So my report, I'll go to Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, just regarding the BC ferries, no disrespect to the ferries, but to say their new schedules be half an hour late, that's, I mean, it makes me laugh. It should make everybody laugh. When they say that their delays are due to volume, I mean, like, wouldn't they build a business model around being full all the time? Like, I'm not sure what's happening there. And then the other fact is that even if a resident, not so much a resident has priority, but there's a lot of goods and services that are coming over here for businesses that may not come in, tankers or stuff like that. But I'd like to see, like, somebody put some pressure on BC Ferries to, if somebody has a business here that's relying on a shipment of goods, those people don't get a 3 sailing ferry wait, that they get over here and those goods get to those people, and so on and so forth. So that's one area I'd like to see improve.
Yeah, I think one thing we could consider doing, if council was of a mind, is to write to BC Ferries and again encourage them to keep working on the schedule and improving the service over here, identifying things like service for business and medical services and residents as priorities. But I think that it's not been a good experience for people who have had to travel by ferry lately, and reservations are almost non-existent. I'm going over tomorrow morning. We couldn't get a reservation to come back Wednesday or Thursday, so that we're in that kind of summer sailing timeframe now. Councillor Crowell, I saw your hand up. Your pencil up?
Because I also sit on the ferry advisory, we had a note that there is a new schedule coming out, and I was just looking online to see if they've posted it, and they don't seem to have. But there was so the schedule that Minister Simons was referring to, I believe it's a schedule that was proposed for, I think the revised date was July 10th or July 13th.
That would be probably about it, yeah.
But they put the 5:30 sailing back in, and they'd spaced it out a little more, but I don't see it on their site. It was on their site and now it's gone. So, oh, wait a minute. No, it July 2nd. So they do have the 5:30 back in, but it's okay. We won't go there.
Councillor Lumley, I see your hand again.
I strongly agree with that, just because I know from smaller businesses, like, say, even the fishmonger at the public market, I mean, they've got a window of opportunity, and if they can't get their product delivered, they open at 10 o'clock in the morning. If somebody's not delivering their product until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it just does them no favors. It's hard to operate a business not having product and people not relying on the fact that you might have the product. So I strongly suggest that.
Suggesting that we do a resolution and do a letter.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you'll move that, and Councillor Kroll second that. Okay, and so a letter to BC Ferries encouraging them to work in the schedule, but also recognize the needs of small businesses on the Sunshine Coast, requiring deliveries of materials, including perishable goods for their operations. Okay, Councillor Kroll, you want to add something?
Yeah, I would just suggest that, as we have done in the past, that we copy the regional district and the district of Sechelt.
Certainly.
And if you copy me on it, I will ensure that it goes to the Ferry Advisory Board, who are almost daily having conference calls with BC Ferries.
Okay.
So if we can get the letter together and get it endorsed by the other governments, we'll get it into the food chain to the Ferry Corporation.
So it's been moved and seconded, and all in favor? Thank you. Good. Yeah, and I hadn't heard that giving priority recognition to the needs of small business. I think it's a very important thing that we should recognize and all of that. So I have heard similarly that talking to one business mentioning that their supplier used to come over twice a day from Vancouver, and now they only get to come once a day because the ferry is so unreliable for them. So, Councillor Kroll again.
Sorry, it has been brought up through the Ferry Advisory Board, but having all the governments, behind us certainly will help.
Good, thank you. Okay, I just need to step back for just a second because I just came across in my paperwork here the resolution that deals with it. It was from the Plan and Development Committee of June 24th, and it was regarding the cannabis facility at 1037 Venture Way. And this was a recommendation that the zoning amendment bylaw for cannabis production be forwarded to council for first and second reading, and the public hearing be scheduled for 5:30 on July the 14th. And that recommendation be forwarded to the next council meeting for adoption to allow for notification of the public hearing to take place. The corporate officer, has that been done? Do I need to?
I'm not sure what you're looking at, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I've got a page. It's called page 2 of 2, and
I think that could be last week's agenda.
Could be an old one. It could be. I've got paper all over my desk here, so it could well be.
That was already executed because we already advertised for the public hearing.
All right, I'm going to throw that one on the floor. Gone. Don't worry about it. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move to item 10, council correspondence, and this is a correspondence. First one is 10.1, and this is a council reading file for the week ending June 15, 2020 and June 22, 2020. Recommendation they be received. Councillor Kroll, thank you. Councillor D'Andrade, thank you. Now, would council like to highlight anything on any of those agendas, reading files? Councillor D'Andrade?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. On the 22nd, there is an article that talks about creating a proactive antenna seeding protocol and small cell licensing agreement. This regards the installation of small cell antennas for 5G, but also 4G. And what happened is in the past, you have bigger antennas, but if you are far away from the antennas, you would be relatively safe. With the installation of these antennas, anyone is exposed. And the biggest danger is actually children, right? Or young people. And I have been reading about 5G, and I bought some packages. I haven't had a chance to, just a second. But I actually have a book here that I already read from Professor Emeritus of Biochemistry and Basic Medical Science from Washington State University, Dr. Martin Paul. And the title of his book is 5G, The Scientific Perspective. And one of the things he talks about that I believe most people are not aware, our legislation for electromagnetic waves are really, compared to Nordic countries, is 70 times less stringent. And compared to Russia, it's kind of 1,000. So it's quite a gap. And the reasons are because I believe we are neighbors of the United States, and the lobbies for the communication industry, they are too powerful. And so this documentation talks about that the government of Canada itself encouraged local governments to create seeding protocols that reflect and protect local interests. And so in preparation for 5G, providers are installing a growing number of small cell antennas on our streets. So if we don't have a saying, they will keep doing the minimal regulations. And I think it's very important that we become aware, first of all, what are the regulations, and get feedback from, get knowledgeable. And I mean, ideally, this should be going to the environmental committee and former committee where we can have expertise of people. But hopefully the environmental committee is forming really soon. But this is a subject that we should jump immediately. And I'm sure I haven't done the research yet. Other municipalities, but I know there's already a big concern about that. So I would like to make a motion. I don't know, perhaps maybe Michelle, you can help me, whether the town would take or it's brought to the Environment Committee to be formed, but this is quite a urgent subject in a way. It's not something that we should be sitting, because as we speak, people could be installing these antennas. And if we don't say anything, once it is installed, it's very difficult to address that.
I'm going to refer to the CAO and ask him to comment. I guess the question is, can people just come and install antennas? It hasn't been the past, but.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly where antennas have been installed here, the folks have gone through a process primarily related to the siting of those proposed facilities. One didn't get approved and one did. Outside of that, we're not aware that there's ongoing installations going on without the town's involvement specifically. The FCM has a siting protocol that they put out a couple of years ago, maybe more than a couple of years now. And that's what we used the last time around.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind that the conversation was in the community, there were at least a couple of open houses and information meetings, and they were well attended and certainly generated a fair amount of interest. That's all I have at the moment, so I don't have anything specific to comment on, any specific knowledge of projects that are going on at the moment.
Perhaps if Councilor Diendrad, did you want to refer that to staff for an update and discussion, Councilor Diendrad?
Yes, and I also have a question. The standards that the FCM is applying, is it above what the federal government is regulating, or is the same? Because there is regulation. The issue is apparently it's not enough, and even the government is suggesting, the federal government is suggesting that local governments takes the leadership in regulating. And I think we should look at the cases, certain places we might not want to allow that. So,
Okay.
I mean, I haven't done the research myself, so I'm limited right now, but the things that I have researched for a while, and it's about 5G. And this is not like a small group that is really concerned. There's specialists, scientists all over the world. There's highly concerned with the speed. And because the protocol it's not like precautions, right? And let's test enough to see the impact. It's like, okay, let's do it. And if the problem with all this electromagnetism, which every cell in our body responds to magnetic field, the problem is a lot of this, by the time you find out, is late, right? There's concerns with children not being able to, perhaps one of us won't be able to have grandchildren in the future because of 5G. So these are serious concerns. And I would like this to, I don't know exactly like we go about it, but this is not something that we should just sit and relax.
Perhaps, Councilor Diendrad, if you'd like to propose a motion, the staff bring forward the FCM report and a discussion of how we approach these things in our town.
Okay, and perhaps how other cities are dealing with that, right? An example of other small town, yeah.
Somebody care to second that? Councillor Kroll, you second that? Or Councillor Ladwig, thank you. Further discussion, Councillor Kroll?
What I would recommend, TELUS did a presentation to the regional district on the $43 million cell upgrade that they're doing on the, now I don't know, it includes the Sunshine Coast right up to Lund. As far as I know from the presentation I attended, the new sort of smaller cells that they're putting in to cover some of the dead spots where cell reception is bad are areas along the highway, like in Roberts Creek, where cell reception is notoriously bad. But what I would suggest is that we invite TELUS to come and do a presentation because, you know, there's a huge pressure right now because of COVID to improve cell service, to improve wireless service. So, you know, I think before we shoot them down in flames, we should find out, you know, from a community point of view of what they're proposing to do that would affect us in the community. I've seen articles on the concern about 5G, but whether it's even going to come to the coast remains to be seen. So I think, TELUS did a dog and pony show for the regional district. I would suggest that we perhaps invite them to come and see, come and do a delegation to us and see what they're actually offering and ask them questions.
Would you agree to amend your motion to add that, Councillor Diandrad, Councillor Ladwig?
I think my point is it's not. I think what I'm trying to attain it's for us to get knowledgeable because it's the same story as climate change. The industry denied for years, and now look the situation. So I think to hear from the communication English, they actually, I was listening to a policy expert in the state, sorry I don't remember her name, but she was talking how all this legislation are so updated, and even with the safety, for example, when they discuss in the cell phone, they talk about heat, and heat is the least dangerous situation on the cell phone, right? It is, there's some impact with the heat, but there's way other things. So I think we are in the situation where we can still invite them, but they're not gonna add. That's the issue. Our safety requirements, they are fulfilling the requirements. So I don't know how much they will add. I think what we want is to understand what the issues are and get knowledgeable. And ideally, this will be a committee to form because this is not something that a single staff should take. It's a complex thing, but I think we should get knowledgeable to protect ourselves.
Let's take it one step at a time. Then we'll ask staff to come forward with information from FCM and the process they've done in the past, and then we'll take it forward from there as to what the next step should be. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Appreciate it.
Everybody in agreement with that? All in favor? Thank you. Thank you very much for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
Anything else arising? Councillor Kroll?
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. From the correspondence for the week of June 15th, there's a letter from Patrick Weiler indicating that there is up to $100,000 available for small construction projects for accessibility. And it just occurred to me that it might be, if we have the capacity to apply for the money, that it might be an opportunity for us to look at improving public washroom access. So that was that was in the June 15th reading list, and it was under the sensitive material. There was also note.
Can I ask before you go on, Councillor Kroll, is there an issue with public washroom access?
Well, I know we've had some issues with people with mobility issues accessing our public washrooms in the lower village.
Okay.
So
aware of that. Okay.
I think you know, there's some indication which way the doors open. If you're in a wheelchair, does the door open that you can get in there? Is, you know, so I just thought it was an opportunity if, you know, if someone had the time to be able to apply for the funding.
Well, don't jump off. CIO, are you aware of this? Is it something we can push forward?
Mr. Mayor, certainly I'm aware of it. We're working at the moment with, there's some interest on the part of the Visit Information Center and Sunshine Coast Tourism that we would work together to attract some more funding for next door for accessibility, including a washroom. There's a nice washroom that we just built there. There's some limitations on the access because of COVID. Nevertheless, we want to improve that facility for public access and are looking at the grant at the moment for that purpose.
I just wanted to mention that this application is open till July 13th.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We're doing our best, see what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no more hands up, we'll move on to the next item. This is from Michael Hayes, the gallery manager, Gibsons Public Art Gallery. And this is a letter that is submitted regarding the grant that we provided the art gallery this year and requesting the council authorize the timeline for the use of the 2020 grant to be extended to June 2021. And that's because this particular showing that they were planned for had to be canceled. And so he's asking rather that this was from our grants of assistance that be transferred to, given to the end of June as opposed to the end of March, I think is what we had said previously. Council have any concerns about that, or Councillor Crowell?
Just a quick recap. If I recall correctly, they had applied for this money last year, but it didn't happen. And then this year they applied for some money for shelving. And I thought we suggested that they take the money that they had in hand to use for their shelving and then reapply for forthcoming projects. So I was a little confused when I saw this correspondence.
Councillor or CAO, would you speak to this?
Certainly, Ms. Mayor, through Lorraine is unfortunately not with us tonight, but I did meet with her about this matter. She confirmed that what this is about is the policy, the monies used that they're proposing to show for next year, for June, and our policy requires the money to be spent by the end of April. This just bumps it another 60 days, which is very practical for obvious reasons. So that's not primarily, that's specifically what this issue is about.
I believe this was for a First Nations show that they were planning to have to hire somebody to curate that show.
Yeah.
I'll move it.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lumley. Seconded by Councillor Crowell. Further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. And the next one, 10.3, is from Brenda Butterworth Carr, Assistant Deputy Minister, Director of Police Services, regarding policing and security branch funding for police services. This is interesting because this is the correspondence that's dated June 17th, advising us that we may be surpassing 5,000 population and that we need to engage with the police and security branch for further information. David, you recall that last year when they were doing the study, the policing study, they tried to engage with police service branch and they didn't want to talk with them last year. Now it's just kind of their formal notice inviting us to engage with them. So we have that report done. So that I think that a recommendation that receiving this letter and as well as that we direct staff and perhaps Councillor Lumley, who was chair of that committee, to engage as necessary with the ministry staff on this issue. Is that anything else council would like to do, or is that sufficient this time? Councillor Lumley?
Well, I mean, not that I guess I'd be more than happy to engage with them, but on a personal level, I know of several, if not hundreds, of people under the age of 25 that have moved back to the Sunshine Coast due to the coronavirus pandemic. I don't know. I mean, 5,007. I don't know. I don't want to get caught in this thing. I know there's a census coming up, but I mean,
It's the census that determines our population,
yeah,
not,
yeah.
not the ministry. But now it's preparation for that. And,
Yeah, I think we're prepared. I mean, we just have to start putting money aside. But anyway, it would be unfortunate if that happens. So anyway.
Okay, so if council resolved to direct staff to engage with the police and security branch and for further information. Councillor Kroll moved. Councillor Lumley seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. I'm sure this will be high on our agenda priorities for the next 2 years. Okay, next we come to bylaws, the invasive and noxious weed control bylaw, number 1281. And this is for first and second reading. Before we do that, Councillor Diendrad, do you want to discuss it? Go ahead.
Yes. Oh.
Yep, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. First of all, I would like to just to explain why I voted against coming to council, not because I'm against a bylaw. I'm actually a lot in favor of a noxious weed and invasive species bylaw. And thanks, Sue, for obviously bringing this staff. But I think the current bylaw is still needs. I have many unanswered questions. For example, it's not clear to me if this is a not weed bylaw or a bylaw that involve other species, right? That's not clear because on the bylaw, there's a Schedule A that says all noxious weeds identified in Schedule A of the Weed Control Regulation of the Weed Control Act as amended from time to time. So what she's saying is the Schedule A of the bylaw should be the Weed Act control. And if you go on the Weed Act control on Schedule A, are the province all invasive and noxious weeds in the province, which many of them don't even pertain to us. So then my question is, are we talking about just not weed? Are we going to involve species like Scott broom, which is not noxious, but it is, well, it could be classified as, but it's very economically and fire prone, or even English ivy that, you know, doesn't have huge impact in the short term, is slow, but it can impact forests. I've seen with my own eyes. So that's not clear at all. Then there's the bylaw doesn't talk about necessarily management and control. There is a very good document made by a consultant that was showed attached to the bylaw, but the bylaw does not refer to this document. And this document at least talks about the difference in knotweed to start with identification, which is a big deal. So knotweed specifically, it's, you know, you need to know how to identify. And then you need, based on identification, there are several ways of controlling. So first, this is very complex. The law also doesn't have necessarily a clause that says when the presence of knotweed is confirmed, the owner must comply with a protocol, for example, which was offered on the management plan for knotweed. So anyone can do any protocol that could cause more problems than solutions. The bylaw also doesn't talk about proper disposal. So this is one of the issues to start with. Then there's another thing. The introduction of the bylaw does not involve an educational campaign, which is identified on the management report as a top prevention measure. They say engaging in knotweed education initiatives is a preventive action that can be done quickly while other more complicated pieces of the project are addressed. So there's so many things. Plus, there was last PDC, there were 3 members that were not, that did not attend the meeting. And one of the members actually sent an email, which he says, in the email, it says, could the effort to remove invasive species be accompanied by some sort of public information campaign? I support the town's acting on unattended property. I support the town acting on unattended property, but would also like to see homeowners more informed and prepared to deal with this plant. And his feedback was not even considered in our discussion. So my proposal here, that this goes back to the PDC, and I particularly would like to make a motion that involves direct staff to develop an educational campaign to introduce the bylaw, where it's explained the environmental, economic, health, and safety impacts of invasives and noxious weeds, the diverse control methods, and also that the invasive species bylaw be updated to include a complete list of noxious weed and invasives impacting Gibsons and the Sunshine Coast, or the ones that we want to do in the bylaw. That has to have a discussion too. Individual appendix for proper management and disposal of each plant, because each plant requires different treatment. And the bylaw should also have clauses that says that the management and disposal of invasive and noxious plant species must follow the prescribed guidelines. So, and that the updated draft and education comes back to the PDC with these recommendations, and then we can have another discussion. Because right now, I think I cannot even support this bylaw as it is, because it's incomplete in my view.
Director of Planning.
Thank you, Mayor. I just put my hand up because I might be able to answer some of those questions that Councillor DeAndrade brought up. So the first question about whether this bylaw is specific for knotweed or more species, there are 2 attachments to the bylaw. So the first attachment is Schedule A of the Weed Control Regulation, and that includes a list of species that the province recommends, that the province regulates. So it would include Canada thistle, common reed, the hogweed species. It has a list of them. The yellow flag iris is another one. So those species would be included in this bylaw. That schedule is attached to this bylaw. Schedule B to the bylaw is specific to just Japanese knotweed. When it was presented to the PDC, there was an attachment to the report that suggested another list of regulated species that the PDC could attach to the bylaw, and that would include the Scotch broom, the English ivy, those other species. The PDC didn't specifically ask for that to be included, so it wasn't included in this bylaw. So, so that conversation, it didn't really evolve to add more to the list. In terms of the treatment, each species has a different treatment plan. So the bylaw is ultimately the regulatory tool to say, or to require somebody to treat an invasive plant. It's not the tool to outline how each plant should be treated, because there are so many different methods of treatment, and it really depends on the scale of the growth, essentially. And then in terms of disposal, because there are so many different species and different plants, they're disposed of differently. So, so those are 2 very, very important aspects of invasive plant management, but it's not, putting it in a bylaw is not the appropriate method. In terms of an education initiative, that's absolutely a very important component of this. And that would, the best way to put that out would be to put it out hand in hand with the bylaw. So there would be a communications campaign. There would be a website. We would link it to all the expert websites. So Invasive Species Council of BC, the Sea to Sky Invasive Species Committee, the Coastal Invasive Species Council. They are the experts in this field, and we would rely on them to share that information. but that's so much detail that wouldn't go into the bylaw. The bylaw essentially says, if you have an invasive species, you have to control it and come up with a plan to control it. And if you don't, then that gives the town the authority to come up with a plan, come up with a treatment plan, and charge the landowner for it instead of it just spreading. So I hope that answers some of the questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councilor Diendrad, you want to respond?
Yes, with regards to Schedule A and the province list knotweed as well. So I don't understand why, if our bylaw talks about Schedule A, which mentioned the weed control act, and the weed control act provides including knotweed. I don't understand why Schedule B is just about knotweed. So that's something that I don't understand. But with regards to management and control, yeah, I understand that each species deserves different control methods, different prevention, different treatments, different disposal as well. But we still, for example, in our tree bylaw, we talk about disposal methods. So why would the tree bylaw, which also dealing with 11 protected species, at least in our town, why would they recommend proper disposals of methods? So it isn't a clause that they talk. And why the invasive species, which has way more consequences. For example, if we talk about knotweed can cause huge disasters. So why wouldn't have? I still feel that the bylaw is very raw. I understand that you're not going to list in the bylaw every single, but what you can, every single method and control, but you can do in the bylaw is to have a clause that they have to follow the methodology in the attached. It could be the appendix of the bylaw or something, because otherwise there will be a lot of room for mismanagement of invasive species. So if we are being so strict with the way we are managing our forests, and invasive species also invade our forests. So why would an invasive bylaw would be like very broad, and it gives room for harsh consequences when you think about knotweed and environmental pollution? Because if someone starts putting knotweed and a lot of Roundup, which is usually used for chemical control, that could be a lot of Roundup in our environment. So I think it deserves more discussion.
Councilor Ledwig.
Sorry, I'm still a little bit confused. Like, what if we just took out Schedule B? Like, does Schedule A not contain knotweed?
Yes. On the province, if you go to the Weed Act, it's listed there.
Director of Planning.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that's correct, Councillor D'Andrade and Councillor Ladwig. Schedule B includes knotweed species, and they have been added to the Weed Control Act. So that might as well just come off. That can be an amendment and just stick to Schedule A. And if council did want to expand the list to the provincially noxious weeds, that would expand the list. But essentially the intent behind the staff report was to have some kind of control over Japanese or all the different knotweed species, because we get so many complaints about it.
Councilor Lumley.
Yeah, could we maybe bring this back to a committee of the whole meeting? It seems like it needs like more discussion. We could all do a little bit of research before then. And
I don't think, yeah, I think you're right. We're not going to resolve it tonight. So motion to refer this back to the was it committee of the whole? Was it?
DC, doesn't matter.
Yeah, let's go back to committee of the whole, or Councilor Ladwig, was this in your committee, the Planning and Development Committee?
I wasn't present at that meeting.
Oh, that's why we're here tonight. Okay, so we'll go back to the Planning and Development Committee meeting, and Motion, Councilor Diandrad,
Yeah,
Councilor Lumley seconded. And any further discussion? Councilor Kroll?
I think, to give staff their due, what they were trying to do was give bylaw enforcement some capability of dealing with invasive species. Currently knotweed is the #1 offender, but we don't know. In 6 months, there may be a new weed added to the list. So, I think there needs to be flexibility. So as the director of planning suggested, this is a tool for giving bylaw the ability to knock on a door and say, hey, you've got a big problem here. Can we help you deal with it?
And can we have
We don't have
can we have
that
this discussion of the Planning Development Committee now? So please. So
Yeah.
all in favor of referring it back to the Planning Development Committee? Thank you. Okay, it's referred. Thank you. Let's resolve it there, Councilor Diandrad.
I just want to add something that it was not in the motion.
Okay, what did you want to add to the motion?
That the communication plan is also brought.
We can deal with that at the Planning Development Committee. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so the next one is 11.2, and this was the bylaw from today, and this has to do with the tree preservation bylaw and recommendation of the tree preservation bylaw number 1282 2020 be given first and second reading. You're all familiar with this. Councilor Kroll moved. Councilor Lumley seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Is in favor. Okay, new business, the town of Gibson's policy regarding naming of streets, parks, and public facilities. I asked that this be placed on the agenda. I had conversations with Councilor Chris Lewis of the Squamish Nation Council earlier this year in February. And we were going to follow that up at the leadership committee meeting in March, which we weren't able to hold. And then he wasn't able to participate the one in June. So essentially what he and I discussed was the idea that the new development of Gospel Rock, which was a well-used area by the Squamish Nation, it might be appropriate that we look at Squamish names for that particular subdivision. There are no approved names for it. There's working names, and sometimes working names ending up being the official name if we don't catch them. And so I had the discussion with him. I followed that up with an email a week or so ago asking if that was possible. And he asked for a resolution from council to the Council of the Squamish Nations, asking they provide some names to be considered for that purpose. Now, in looking at that, I also asked staff to put our policy on the naming of streets and parks and public facilities. And I would like to also request that council refer this policy back to staff to be updated, reviewed and updated. It focuses, it's very much a settler policy. If you've had a chance to read it, it focuses on all our names being to ensure that early settlers, community builders, and volunteers are recognized for their contribution to the community. And I think that's important. But what is missing on there is that the traditional names from the Squamish Nation are not recognized at all in this policy. And I think that it would be appropriate to add that to the policy and have a list of Squamish names that could be looked at, both for our street naming, but also for places. Gospel Rock, for example, some of those areas. So could be done. So open for discussion. Councilor Lumley, I saw you first, then Councilor Diandrad, Councilor Kroll.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, the parks and public facilities. I just remember last term when we were naming streets and lanes.
Yeah.
There's a 911 element to street names where if someone is dialing 911, they need direction. They have to be able to say and spell the name. And so that could come into play in this discussion at some point. So if we're asking for names, that's just something to keep in consideration in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. Councilor Diandrade.
It just made me think, for example, I was speaking today in terms of name, why White Tower Park is called White Tower Park. So if this list could also include the genesis of names of our landmarks, that would be interesting too, as a piece of information, right? And touristic in the future. And
I bet Council Kroll has the answer to that.
The White Tower Park one?
Yeah.
I believe it goes back to when the medieval society used to use the area behind the Gibsons pool for their sort of drama sessions. And the area was referred to as.
That makes sense. It's good enough for me right now, anyway.
But further to that, because this is also coming up at the regional district, right up and down the coast, also dealing with the Seashell Nation. And the concern that Director Lumley brought up is a huge concern, and it has been raised by 911. And there already have been incidents in other areas where, there's a traffic accident, someone looks at a sign on the highway and they're sort of stumped. Something that is here, and I think it came up at one of our meetings, I think during the strategic plan, is aside from locations like Gospel Rock and certain places that are, have a significant Native history, First Nations did not use streets and roads and highways. They used the water. And I think it would be particularly fitting if we could find the resources for signage that faced the water for tourists and boaters, that when they're traveling, they know the name, like the Gospel Rock, there would be some sort of signage that indicated from the water what that piece of land was. The entrance to Gibsons Harbor, Armour's Beach, and things like that. And I think it's a really good opportunity. The other area is with the Healing Forest, is to get into native names for some of the plant species. So I think, there is an opportunity for signage and recognition without it becoming terribly confusing for people when they're mad in a panic trying to dial 911 and figure out where they are.
Yeah, I think that should be consideration. A lot of signage where they use both the First Nations name or word, and they'll also have with it the interpretive words, so that we can take a look at that to see. But I think right now I'm just asking the council request staff to or authorize a resolution requesting the Squamish Nation to provide us with some names and some background to that for consideration in the town. Councillor Kroll?
I'd move that.
With that. Councillor Lumley seconded. Any further discussion? No. All in favor? Oh, sorry, the discussion, Councillor Kroll?
Just one quick thing. The Seashell Nation and probably the Squamish Nation have it, but I wasn't able to find it that easily, is they provide actually a pronunciation,
yes,
both a male and a female voice. So if we get into the signage, as we did with the Walk on the Water, it might be an idea to incorporate QR reader things that people could click on it. It would link to the website that actually gives the proper pronunciation.
Good idea. Yeah, I think that one of my conversations with Councillor Lewis was that when you're on the Horseshoe Bay side of the Squamish Nation, you recognize that you're within the Squamish territory. When you get off the ferry at Langdale, where are you? There's nothing acknowledging. We have Checkwell Preserve. We have 3 reserves between Househound Pulp and Paper and Gibsons, and most people couldn't pick out all 3 reserves. So that I think it's important that we recognize the culture that existed here before we did. Councillor Kroll?
You know, as you say, coming off the ferry, perhaps in the redevelopment of the Langdale terminal, as is at the airport, there's the totem with the welcoming. It'd be a perfect location for it.
Thanks. Okay, did we vote on that? All in favor? No, voted anything just in case. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, moving next to inquiries. Number 14 is inquiries again, opportunity for anybody to ask a question. We have only a few minutes left, so please, corporate officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, I'll ask anybody who's in the meeting as an attendee to please use the raise the hand feature at the bottom of the screen, and I'll turn on your video and sound. And Mr. Mayor, I'm seeing one inquiry.
Thank you. Suzanne Singer, welcome.
Hello. Mayor Beamish, further to that conversation you were just having about Squamish names, one of the things that, so I work a lot in Howe Sound and with Squamish Nation, and one of the things we always do at events like the Howe Sound Community Forum is when we, at the beginning of the meeting, when you recognize that this meeting takes place, or we're all here on the
You're frozen.
So Chiquelt, which is, how it's a tricky one, but it doesn't, a little practice makes perfect. Another suggestion is English phonetic translations on signs so that, and the other, we've been having a conversation with that community for a long time about Kroll, speak to that. I don't know if this council, if this group knows that the Squamish Nation's creation story depicts that, the world Chequelt, the Squamish Beach, where we all go swimming, our favorite, hotspot, this is where the world began. So that's actually, I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but it's a really, it's a well-loved place, and there might be some value in a conversation about that. I had there's two things on this agenda. The first one, is this council going to start having a conversation about policing? I mean, in a real way soon. 5,000, we're going to hit 5,000. We're going to hit a, 30% tax increase. The whole world, well, maybe North America is looking at, defund the police and all this stuff going on around BLM and different conversations around, how, what policing looks like. So this is a pretty, serendipitous opportunity for this group to, start having a conversation like that. I haven't heard you talk in these terms. And so I guess, if I have to frame it as a question, is this on your mind?
We haven't at this time. I've had some talks with the staff sergeant. They are actually putting in for a mental health car. Two-person team for mental health car for the coast, because that's a big part of policing, as you know, and it's also one of the parts of policing that causes often the most problems. So that I know they're working on that. This will be our opportunity when we will have the opportunity to in some sense design the Gibsons Police Force.
Yeah.
And that's what we'll be working on with the police services branch and with council, and perhaps with the committee that we established last year, bring them back together to look at that, because we have a choice in terms of how we police our community to a degree of needing to make sure that it's policed safe in accordance with the Police Act, which takes precedence, but also taking a look at the resources that are applied to that policing. So that's going to be the conversation we're going to have between now and 2022, when we're going to be suddenly finding ourselves requiring to pay for that. That will be a conversation. Not only do we have to provide the policemen, we have to provide the staff at the RCMP office as well.
Right. And so just a little bit of a follow-up on that is, you know, is there an opportunity to really have the conversation about how to innovate, not just a mental health car, but really sort of, you know, have a committee, get people involved. There's this, you know, there's a lot of people really interested in changing the sort of old school way that we do this stuff. You know, and there's a lot of conversations we don't have at the council table about the reality of what goes on the street. So
the reality that we're going to be faced with is what the province is going to let us do in that context, with their kind of how much they'll let us pull back from the traditional policing model. We contract with the Attorney General's Department. That's who our contract. No, actually, Solicitor General. We will be contacting with the Solicitor General's Department. And they provide the policing. So we tell them what we want. If we go too far outside the model that they have, they might say, well, okay, you can have your 6 policemen. And then if you want to have anything above that, that's another cost that you have to deal with in another way, in another contract way. They become our employees. So we'll just have to look at that. This is new to us, new to the community. And in some cases, are probably being the next municipal police department in the province, policed by RCMP. It'll be unique also the police services branch. So we will be having those conversations, definitely.
Okay. I'm really interested in those conversations. So if they can be sort of open to the public so that we can have input in that, there's a lot of really good people working on these issues. So I hope you'll make sure that happens. The last piece is the safe injection site, Mayor Beamish. You know, it's tragic what's going on in this province and on the coast. And so a statistic that I learned last week in talking with somebody who's very involved in that is that per capita, the Sunshine Coast has the highest overdose rate in the province. And so, you know, the number may be very small because we have a small population, but when you think of that, this is a huge impact on our community. And I just want to say something that, you know, other people might not say, which is kind of my thing. You know, politics gets in the way of saving lives. And there's politics going on in Sechelt that are different than the politics that go on in Gibsons, partially because they face the sort of the backlash from the community more because they see the impacts more. It's more in their face, partially because of the human beings on, you know, in front of me right now. And so I just want to encourage this council, you know, to take some leadership where others may not be able to of what.
You're breaking up, Suzanne.
Time's up.
Yeah, we've lost you, Suzanne. Okay.
You've lost me?
We've lost you. Yeah, whatever that last minute was, you weren't with us. So, yeah, you're frozen, just like you are right now. Okay, but you have actually, unlike Sechelt, you have the mayor and the Councillor Crow who sit on the CAT committee. We have visited Hot Feather Peterson and her operations. We are aware of the issues, and we also understand the sensitivity of bringing the issues into the community and working in the committee. And we're looking forward to supporting the survey that's being done. I believe it's the 16th, if I'm not mistaken, and it's going to be done in Dougal Park. And looking forward to the results of that and moving forward. So, thank you for your questions. Thank you. Are there any further questions, Corporate Officer?
Yes, we've got one more, Mr. Mayor. One moment.
Thank you. Mr. Baker, welcome.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
Let me just put myself on here. Here we go. My question addresses the tree bylaw. First and foremost, I am absolutely delighted that this tree preservation bylaw is now before council and is moving along the process. As I understand it, tonight there was a first and second reading of that bylaw, and it's not slated for adoption until near the fourth quarter or near the end of the year. And that in the interim, there is actually no bylaw. And what I'm reading from the agenda is that staff will encourage voluntary compliance with the spirit of the bylaw until the adoption. That concerns me because it's voluntary, first of all, and developers who feel that they want to get out the chainsaws before the bylaw is actually adopted won't be prevented. Is that correct?
There's always, there are a number of other bylaws that relate to it, including development permits, but we are hoping not to leave this to the fall. We're actually hoping to bring this back in September after there's been some consultation with the community, and then move forward with it. So I would hope this could be actually, if we give it first and second reading now, if it comes forward to consultation and possibly a public hearing on it in September, it could be adopted by the end of September.
That would be wonderful. And then, of course, you know, we will live with it for a while, and then hopefully we'll get more information, more feedback, and then there can be amendments to that bylaw, I presume.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I would just encourage the staff or council to somehow make the encouragement of the spirit of the bylaw very, very strong.
Thank you.
You know, let's keep the chainsaws in the truck bed. Anyway, it's great to see this coming forward. Congratulations, that's correct.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Director, Corporate Officer, is there any further inquiries?
I'm not seeing any further inquiries, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we're gonna get done before 9 o'clock for a change. So our next meeting is scheduled for July 21st at 7 p.m. unless there's a special meeting called in the interim. And we are focused on holding meetings so that we can have our usual break in August. And so that's why we may be more meetings coming up as special meetings. And I hope the council will be available to work with staff on those as they come up. So give a motion to adjourn, please. Councilor Kroll, Councilor D'Andrade, thank you very much. All in favor. And if I could hold your attention. Lindsay Griss, Corporate Officer, are you there?
Yep.
You let me know when we're no longer live, please.
One moment.
Thank you.